Hi, I'm Dennis Guzy, Director of Intelligent Cloud Strategy for Microsoft State and Local Government.
And I'm Bob Ballard, the Principal Cloud Strategist over at Planet Technologies.
And today we're going to talk about Microsoft's Azure Sentinel, a security incident and event management tool born in the cloud.
I might give you guys a little bit of a warning. Dennis and I might have done 1 or 100 presentations together, and we are known to get a bit long. So we're really going to try to keep things brief and drive home the most important points.
Thanks, Bob. So today, organizations are faced with the incredibly difficult task of trying to protect their expanded digital estate from cyber threats. The move to the cloud and the expanding mobile workforce have pushed the border of your estate beyond the boundary of your physical network. Your data and your users are everywhere, and your systems are everywhere. The frequency and sophistication of attacks, however, are growing. So regardless of the size of your organization or the type of target you are, you're going to start seeing a number of challenges that you're going to face from a security operations perspective. Now, one of the things that we're going to talk about today, and the tool that we're going to talk about today, is designed to help you deal with those challenges. So we're seeing a number of threats and attacks grow and are becoming more and more complex. We're also seeing our customers are talking to us a lot about alert fatigue. We're seeing a number of customers talk about the traditional tools that they're using having and their environments having dozens of security products and producing information at such large volumes, they can't handle the number of alerts that are coming in, and attacks are starting to fall through the cracks despite the fact that they're actually getting alerts from those different various tools that they're using.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. We've got a bunch of customers that are sort of bringing back the same information to us. So much so, there are so many signals coming out of the Office 365 environment that it's actually even overwhelming systems, right? So not only people are getting overwhelmed, but actual systems. I think there's another point when you're a little later on, when you're talking about the rising infrastructure cost, I can bring up a great story to remind me to tell you that.
Okay. One other thing I did want to mention as we move on is there's really right now there's a global shortage of security analysts and people in that space. So as you start to have an increased demand in security resources, we need to have tools that enable you to more easily empower those who are security analysts, but those who may have 1, 2, or 3 different roles inside of your organization. And that's where we start to find ways to introduce additional capabilities and technology and integrate things like our artificial intelligence capabilities that we have at Microsoft. We try to use the cloud to help manage the complexity of that expanding digital estate that you have. What we're focused on is simplifying and making it easier to manage and harness the power of the cloud capabilities to set up your security operations teams or other IT resources and allow them to focus more on their work and not have limits in what it is they're doing.
So it's interesting, Dennis, that you bring up artificial intelligence, and we're going to talk about it a number of times over the course of the presentation. But, so I've been talking about, you and I have been talking about Office 365 since before it was called Office 365 and Azure before it was invented, right, from a Microsoft standpoint. So when I talk to customers, I talk about the evolution of the Microsoft cloud and where the value was for those customers. When we started off talking, it was, to save money, and that's still there. That never goes away. And yeah, I'm not trying to say that that's no longer the issue. Then the next sort of phase was all the capabilities, whether it be around collaboration, et cetera, that you couldn't do yourself, right? So now we've sort of all gone down that path. And, we're all doing Office 365 and sharing OneDrive files, and the end users are high-fiving, and it's great. This final, or latest, because who knows what the next one will be, this latest stage of evolution from the Microsoft Cloud is the injection of artificial intelligence and bringing what it can to the environment, whether it be on the collab side, but in particular what we're talking about today, on the security side, right? That is sort of this latest evolutionary wave of the value prop of the Microsoft Cloud.
Thanks, Bob. The product that we're talking about today and the capability we're talking about today is called Azure Sentinel. So we reimagined the SIEM and the SOAR tool into this new cloud native solution, as I mentioned, called Azure Sentinel. It's designed to provide intelligent security analytics at cloud scale for everyone. Azure Sentinel makes it easy to collect security data across your entire hybrid organization, from devices, from users, from apps, from servers, from other cloud services and cloud providers. And it uses that power of artificial intelligence that Bob was just talking about to ensure you're identifying real threats very quickly. And it's removing you from the burden that traditional SIEMs have by eliminating the time it takes to set those SIEM systems up, maintaining and adding scale as those environments have to grow. Since it's built on Azure, it has a limitless cloud scale and speed in terms of addressing your needs. So one of the additional things that I did want to mention is one of the Microsoft advantages that we bring to the table is the amount of investment that we're doing. We invest over $1 billion annually in cybersecurity. We have over 3,500 security experts globally that are working with not only our cloud, but our other security providers that we integrate with. And we're collecting trillions of diverse signals that build up that artificial intelligence that both myself and Bob have talked about so far.
There really is no vendor that has more signals to pull from to develop this artificial intelligence.
Yep. And so that brings us this removal of some of the limits on the speed and scale in which we can bring to bear these different capabilities. And Azure Sentinel really is a true software as a service solution for those who need a SIEM and SOAR system with the automatic scalability, no server installation, no maintenance, no complex configuration. It lets your security resources or resources who are focused on security tasks to focus on the most important tasks that they have, which is defending you against those different types of threats that are out there. Azure Sentinel is something that's available directly inside of the Azure portal. It's a central place for security operations, and you're getting near real-time view of security events. And one of the other important facts is it also provides you the tools to investigate and respond to incidents.
So when Adam comes on, Adam Ochs from Planet Technologies comes on to do the demo of just how Azure Sentinel looks, works, behaves, etc. I think you'll really see just how easy it is to get going. We're literally going to walk through how quickly it is to get set up and connected.
Yep. The other thing that I think is really, really important is from a cost effectiveness perspective. One of the challenges that I know I hear from customers all the time is the difficulty in not only the initial setup of the SIEM or SOAR systems that they have, but it's the day-to-day maintenance and it's the operational components that exist behind it. Because as you start to introduce all these new systems, whether they're from Microsoft or other cloud vendors, or you're introducing new applications, new capabilities, new technologies, all of those different items that I just mentioned all give you new signal data that you have to ingest from those different systems and cloud providers, etc. So when that happens, you have to build this enormous scale for those systems if you're managing those on premise. Since a lot of our customers are using things already like Office 365 and they're adopting a lot of those advanced security offerings that we have in Office 365, you're also adding a whole new set of security sets of signals that you also have the ability to ingest into those systems. So with Sentinel, you have the ability to reduce those overall infrastructure costs because you're not building out this complex infrastructure and you're not building out for scale that you may or may not ever hit. And you're also really only paying for what you use. By the way, you're not paying anything extra. You're not paying any cost at all. In fact, it's free when you ingest your Office 365 audit logs, your Azure activity logs, and alerts from solutions like our Microsoft Threat Protection capabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're actually seeing a number of our customers sort of start to, let's say, kick the tires with Azure Sentinel based on ingesting the Office 365 data. I think you forgot to remind me way back on that other slide about the story I had about how much data is coming out. It's fine; it fits here too, so we're safe. So so there's so many signals coming from the Office 365 environment into your environment that there's a significant amount of value in making those free, right? But B, it could even be crippling for other SIEM systems that are on-prem today, right? This notion of sort of on-demand scalability to to ingest these signals. There, when we start looking at, cloud app security and your Azure Active Directory login information and exchange data and all of those things and aggregating it together, there's an extraordinarily deep and rich amount of information. And, so having a place to ingest that massive amounts of data into the environment at no cost. Now, to be fair, that is for a certain amount of time that you can keep that data. And depending on what your requirements are, there may be some costs associated for keeping it for up to a year or 2 years, depending on what your requirements are. But, again, still nominal in comparison. And what we often sometimes even see customers doing is, thin out that information as it ages out as well.
Very true. And great point about, because the customers that we're talking about are government customers, it is important to make sure that you're keeping in mind any of those regulatory compliant requirements in terms of storing and maintaining log data when we talk about using the service. One of the big advantages and capabilities that Sentinel has is the ability to integrate with existing tools and other data sources. So Sentinel can aggregate all this security data with built-in connectors and of course the native integration to the Microsoft tools, as well as the support for industry standard log formatting. So I mentioned already, Microsoft 365 customers can import their Office 365 activity data for free to gain those deeper insights. One of the most important things is Microsoft collaborates with many partners as part of our Microsoft Intelligent Security Association. And we support a number of easy to create and configure connectors, and give you the ability to create customizable dashboards for a lot of popular solutions, like ones from Palo Alto or F5 or Symantec, etc. And a lot more are coming. In fact, Microsoft in early 2020 here was just at the RSA conference, and we announced a number of additional security partners that were added to the Intelligent Security Association at that conference.
So it's interesting you bring up conferences, Dennis. So at Planet Technologies, we've been working with a whole bunch of customers on Azure Sentinel in various degrees and elements of how much of their tentacles are sort of reaching into their environment. But one of our best customers, we've really pushed forward, United States Military Academy, or West Point, go Army, so they're one of our customers, and we basically help them on a full transformation to the cloud. So basically they're the majority of the way through a 100% move to the cloud across the board. And as a result, Azure has had to be a very important part of that. Azure Sentinel has had to be a very important part of that story. And we will actually be out at the National Security Symposium in Redmond at the end of this month, I think, towards the end of March. And where we'll be discussing not only the overall transformation, but very specifically how we leveraged Azure Sentinel to be a key component of the security story for this. So remember, you think about it, they're an educational institution, right? So and they're competing against other educational institutions for the best and brightest minds. So those kids, they're still kids at that point, are coming in, young men and women are coming in, and they have very high technological expectations. For those of us who have ever been on site at, say, the DoD, on site at the DoD, we know that high-end, super efficient and easy to use, UI and things like that are not what super secure environments are known for. So they had to walk this fine line, and Azure Sentinel is a big part of that story.
Yep. And one of the important things, and it's interesting, I appreciate you mentioning that customer and the challenges they face specifically, and what you're doing with them is you have the ability in this tool to not only use the insights that we have built in, and we're going to talk about AI in a moment, but you can bring in your own insights where you're creating your own different types of models. But one of the challenges I know that, again, when I talk to customers quite a bit about using different SIEM and SOAR solutions, is the extensive process they have to take to be able to get up and running and to actually create what are the best practices and what do they need inside of their org. And that's where our partners, whether it be our security partners that I mentioned as part of Security Alliance, or our partners even like Planet Technologies, are using community solutions like GitHub to publish things like queries and predefined notebooks, etc. That we'll talk about, and you'll see a little bit of that in the demo, to help ease that transition and give you the ability, especially if you have an organization that doesn't have a number of significant resources, to get up and running pretty quickly and be as secure as possible.
Yeah, Dennis, we actually, I think you mentioned that we are going to show a little bit about this when Adam comes in and does the demo at the end of the video. But this is something we're really thinking about at Planet, right? Because one of the things that we can do with workbooks and notebooks is how do we architect things for the varying interesting scenarios that are unique to the government space, right? So yes, we have some customers that are in education, we have some customers that are in commercial, but the majority of our customers at Planet are in the government space. So what's unique? Example, on the enterprise side, one of the unique things that we have is that, you might have central IT at the state level that's got a very finite set of things that they're deeply concerned about from a security perspective, right? But then the individual departments and agencies may actually have something that they need to be worrying about. And how do I, leverage these sort of pre-built workbooks and notebooks to deliver that experience, custom dashboards as well, right? So how do we, and then publish those out to the community and make those available with engagements with Planet.
Awesome. And we've mentioned it a couple times, artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence is a key component of what Sentinel brings to the table. And what we're talking about there is the ability to analyze and detect threats quickly, leveraging that artificial intelligence. And you saw it mentioned in a previous slide where we're collecting these trillions of signals from all these different services we have. One of the biggest challenges that security resources face is this burden of triaging and sifting through this myriad, this sea of alerts that they get, but then correlating those alerts from all these different products, and trying to come up with the ability to understand and visualize and really be able to scale that process into what is a threat and what do the threats look like. So inside of Azure Sentinel, we use behavior analytics to help you identify anomalies, things like compromised identities or malicious insider actions. Machine learning helps you quickly get value from all that security data that Microsoft is collecting, both from all of our different platforms and technologies, as well as the data we're collecting from you, and connecting those dots. So for example, if you have a compromised account in an Office 365 mailbox, you can help reduce the noise dramatically by being able to pinpoint and focus specifically on that user's mailbox and not the noise that goes around all the other day-to-day activities that happen inside of mailboxes. And those machine learning models are really, leveraging all that built-in capability that we've got from our decades of security experience, in delivering solutions and services to customers.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Look, artificial intelligence is all about the nuances, right? So if we're thinking about this, part of, how Microsoft sifts through the alert fatigue is that it raises the bar to correlating behaviors in certain ways to say that really means a compromise, right? So, part of the struggle is if we say, okay, if somebody accesses the environment from outside the country, send up alerts. Well, guess what? 80-90% of the time, that might be true in our average government customer that doesn't have lots of external activity. But 15 or 20% of the time, it's not true. And if you have 80,000 employees times 20% of the time that they're on vacation, checking their mail, like all of these things are real, right? So how it takes this machine learning and AI is it says, okay, what are some other things that also go with this? Are they, so example that we go back to way back in the early days where some of these technologies, these ability to correlate came from was on some phishing attacks, right? Okay, I have this access externally, but then I suddenly have a new inbox rule being added, as an example, right? Those two things correlating together, that's like a 99.9% chance of having something be. So, I may check my mail from vacation in the Bahamas, right? But I'm probably not writing new rules to sift through my mail, right? That's probably not what I'm doing on the side of the beach. And so and I'm just using it as a one-off example, but this is where these correlations of nuanced things together, that's stuff that humans are not good at, that machines are brilliant at, and that's really what comes from this.
And Bob, it feels like this would be, as we're talking about this, the one thing that I know I've heard from a number of customers is based on the size of their teams. You talked about, the different sizes of customers, and of course you work with a number of different customers of varying sizes, large and small and everything in between. This feels like getting access to that data quickly and making those correlations means that if security is one of the many hats that I wear at a customer, if it's, I'm an Active Directory resource and, one of my tasks with security, having quick access to be able to understand that that's really something I should focus on now is probably all the more critical, right?
Yeah, well, so it's really interesting, right? So the ability to sort of parse through all of this stuff really helps equally customers on both ends of the spectrum. So let's take the enterprise customer for a quick second. Is leveraging through and sort of sifting through these alerts and making sure that people take the right actions in the right places. So the right person is getting this alert routed to them, so that I'm not telling the messaging guy about network authentication logins, etc. Right? So at the high end, it's that. On the smaller customers, it's about really distilling it down to the things that are critical, right? So, because the first way to break something and cause it to be completely unvaluable to your organization is just come in and sit down and say, you have 3,986 alerts overnight, right? And by the way, those numbers could be way more than that, right? Even in a small customer, you might have 30 or 50,000 signals generating tens of thousands of alerts, right? And so what happens when you see that and you come in? I mean, look, when I travel for a day for email and I have 300 or 400 emails in a day, I sit down, look at my email and go, yeah, I'm not even going to bother, right? If they need me, they'll just send me again. Don't tell my boss. But so could you imagine if you had 10,000 sitting there when you sat down, right? So parsing through to say, okay, I think you have a slide towards the end that we're going to talk about. When we say we parse it down to the most important, how many of those tens of thousands of signals actually mean a real alert? And and that's where it helps.
Yep.
Because it basically says, only tell me when things are critically important.
And I know one of the most important things that we hear from customers, and I know you do as well, is the ability to take that data and drive it through from an investigation standpoint. So one of the things that Sentinel does is it uses this graphical and AI-based investigative tools to reduce that time it takes to understand what was the actual scope of attack. So you can really visualize and take quick actions from the same dashboard experience. So you can do this proactive hunting, which is certainly important, and step through and see all the critical tasks related to that operation. So Sentinel has a couple really distinct capabilities that enable you to automate your analysis of, in terms of building those queries and those notebooks, based on those proactive hunting queries and things that we talked about previously. And this is the other side of this is built into the tool is this automated expert guidance, where we've got this virtual security analyst built into the product that goes through from a reasoning perspective all the alerts and gives you scores and creates some things around severities and prioritizes those alerts for you. And this virtual analyst works and thinks like an actual cybersecurity analyst. It creates some of the automated knowledge transfer and knowledge information sharing, so that when you're looking at an alert and you're looking and trying to visualize an attack that maybe has happened and going through a process or going through those pieces, you can get scores and understanding like how malicious was this activity. A couple other things that I think that are super important is that ability to visualize the entire attack and what its impact, and be able to step through that. That's not something that you typically see, built into a SIEM system. You start getting into this area where we blur the lines a little bit and create this tool that takes even the moderate to novice security analyst and security resource and turns them into an effective security professional.
So if you want to take a room full of IT nerds like you and I and make their jaws hit the ground, start looking at some of the investigative capabilities that are delivered from the solution, and then click down to find out what's generating, how it's correlating this event to this event, and the visualizations as to why it alerted on this. So when we were at West Point, we were delivering what we call at Planet a security ECR, which is a comprehensive overview and mapping of the Microsoft security platform in the cloud to the customers, right? So we're there delivering that, and Sentinel obviously is a big part of that story. And so we're there, and we were actually co-presenting with Microsoft, and we're going through. We get to this part, and literally, people start coming in the room, looking, pointing, like, because as they're drilling through. Remember, it's an engineering school, right? So the level of nerdiness across the board is pretty high. But what was really interesting, and this is what I thought was fascinating, because Azure, essentially at its core, right, it takes a bunch of information, right? It analyzes that information. And then through technology, it provides automated action, right? So students at West Point for a particular class has to, their capstone project is actually related to Azure Sentinel, not because they're trying to make a bunch of Azure Sentinel people as they graduate, but it's a perfect sort of, analogy for, data-driven decisions through technology, right? And so as a result, those for the capstone projects, those cadets are actually, building on some things that are being triggered through Sentinel, and then delivering Azure Logic apps out the back end to take action. So, which, shockingly enough, looks like we have a slide about Azure Logic apps.
So you bring up a good point, and one of the things that I think is really important and worth mentioning as part of this process is, when you talk about the orchestration and automation components that again typically exist in a source system, this is where again you have that strength that sits inside of Sentinel. It sounds like, again, from a customer perspective, you've run into this as well, where once you've identified a particular type of problem that exists, you want to have it where you reduce the amount of instances that problem can reoccur. So using this orchestration and automation process, you can take something and basically say this predefined process or this repetitive task that might exist in the space, and be able to step through and automate that. And that includes the automation of the response to a security incident, whether it be shutting down an account or closing something off from an access or capabilities perspective, can all get automated through this process. Or even things like logging tickets into applications that you might have to basically notify if you, for example, you shut down an account. Maybe you want to log a ticket for the support desk to know that account was shut down because of that action. And there's a number of different capabilities that exist in that automation process.
Yeah. So look, even within, Azure Logic apps do a lot of things, right? And even within the context of Sentinel, right, they can do a bunch of stuff. But, if I'm trying to distill to the thing that you need to be thinking, at least out of the gate, right? Let's get you to level 200 in your thinking on Azure Sentinel and Azure Logic apps, is Azure Logic apps translate the actions to what is required either operationally, culturally, or whatever in your environment. So example, there's a bunch. So the impossible travel scenario triggers, right? So let's think about this. This is something that came up, and this is what drove the whole conversation at West Point about, thinking about this more broadly, and that Azure Logic Ops are important. So, so the base behavior for that is I'm going to notify the person that says, hey, are you out of the country, right? So if you think about that in theory, because that's the, sort of the out of the box process. If that account is compromised, who's answering that question? Right?
Good point, yeah.
Right? So if that account's compromised and we have to assume the worst case, and of course when we're talking about, some of our highly regulated customers, they always have to think that way. So wouldn't the right thing to be, go look, this trigger happens, go look against the directory, find out who the person's manager is, notify them, and asks them, is your employee Bob Ballard or Dennis Guzy on out of the country travel? And the answer is yes, then I can just close the event. If the answer is no, then I trigger a series of activities that ultimately, force MFA and blah, 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 blah. So it's an example of, and this is a simple one, right? So this is where, I think Azure Sentinel is about as easy to use as one of these tools I've ever seen, right? That's unquestioned. And in some of these things, and I think some of these basic sort of mid-tier scenarios, like the ones I just connected, like we basically built that thing together as a team in front of everyone. But as we start to get into deeper integrations, like, as a result, I need to, open up this database and get this information and execute this script and reach out to ServiceNow and close a ticket and do, when they start to get a little more complicated like that, that's a place where partners like Planet can come and take that to the sort of the last mile on your execution. But, even some of these basic things, mid-tier kinds of things, which are slight customizations to the normal execution templates, I think customers can really start, if you can think, there's some nuances. I encourage you to watch some videos out there on building Azure Logic Apps. But, as you work through them, if you can sort of logically map together sort of a wizard-driven action, you can, it's a little bit like, Flow with an extra little bit of complexity.
Okay. Well, and it's, closing up and getting to the end of our conversation here, when you think of all the things that we talked about, and I think one of the most pervasive things to be able to walk away from our conversation today is, we've kind of hit on this as we've stepped through the process. If you look at that alert fatigue, that is one of our biggest concerns, and you look at this example here of Microsoft, our alert fatigue in any given day, having 300 billion logins, 4.1 billion actions inside of Office 365, 3.2 billion Azure admin actions. And we start to progress through and we see tens of millions of anomalous behaviors and things that are detected as oddities. And they get converted into, that graph process that we have, that Microsoft security graph. And all that analysis goes into that process. And we look at the identities and credentials and service principals and all these different components. And what that converts into is 18 actual cases worthy of investigation, worthy of additional time and effort. Again, this number is obviously significant in terms of all the data ingested, because we're using Microsoft numbers and Microsoft as a corporation as an example. But it's not unheard of to have, as you mentioned, on any given day, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, for many of our customers, activities that are getting ingested that they might have to sift through, whereas using this tool, and again, in this case, we had hundreds of billions of signals turned into 18 cases. That's a pretty significant set of capabilities that we bring to bear.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this drives home my point of saying that even for the small organization, this sort of alert fatigue and the ability to sift through is absolutely critical. But by the way, the only thing we have in a larger organization is just a larger number of people that are equally as busy, right? So,
yep.
So absolutely, even if I have a dedicated team, I might have 5 other things that I'm doing.
So we really appreciate the time to listen to us talk about Sentinel. Today there's a couple things that you can go do today. You can absolutely start a trial inside of Azure, and inside that trial in Azure, you can open up Sentinel and actually, start to click through. If you want to learn more about Sentinel, go to aka.ms/Azure Sentinel. There's a number of different bits of information, including a walkthrough if you want to do a tutorial to set up a trial and test this out. I encourage you to go to Planet Technologies website as well, and I'll let Bob set up the second half of our session here. If you go to go-planet.com, you can learn more about Planet Technologies. And Bob, in the second half of this session, we've got a demo coming up. Can you set that up
absolutely.
first?
So enough of Dennis and I just talking your faces off, right? Let's get down and see all the things that we just said. So I'd like to welcome Adam Ochs from Planet Technologies to go ahead and sort of walk through the experience of setting up Azure Sentinel and on to some of the things as far as Azure Logic Apps.
Hey, Bob, thanks for having me. I appreciate you guys having me on so I can go ahead and talk about what I think is one of the most exciting and versatile tools that's come to the security world and the cloud world as a whole. So, Azure Sentinel. What we're going to do today is kind of get hands on and actually show the application a little bit, show the tool and kind of how it works, and hopefully give you guys a comfort level that you can go in and actually do some of the setup in your own tenant if you choose to do so, as well as get an understanding of where you can potentially take it because the options and the power of this tool are really pretty limitless when you're looking at what it can do. So coming in as a whole, when you look in, Azure Sentinel actually exists inside of the Azure stack, and you actually build it on top of an existing workplace. So I'm going to recommend if you already have Azure services out there, you already have VMs that you built, make sure you're putting Sentinel in the same workplace where those exist. It's going to make ingesting the data from those servers and pulling that information in much, much easier. If not, if maybe you're new to Azure and what you primarily do is Office 365, that's perfectly okay. Just build out a workspace that you can actually put Sentinel on top of. That's what I've done in my own lab environment here. And you'll come in, and you'll actually see right away, I already have some stuff going on inside of my deployment. So the main landing page that we're going to start out is this overview section. This is actually showing an aggregation of the different logs that I have pulled in from the resources that I have set up. And it's actually really cool. If you're familiar with Power BI, a lot of that same versatility and agility that you get from Power BI to kind of hover over and drill down is going to exist throughout the Sentinel platform. It's one of the things that really makes visualizing and seeing what's going on a lot easier and makes it much more powerful. Whether you're just a basic IT admin that want to get a centralized pane that you can see some of the data going on inside of your system, or whether you're a full-fledged security architect that what you've done for your career is work inside of SIEMs and look through logs and design security systems, Sentinel's going to have tools and abilities for people across the board of skill sets. And it's one of the things I really like about it. So starting in the overview, you can see right now I'm looking at 30 days, which is the default highest limit that you have. If you want to store more logs, you have the option, and you can even drill down as small as 24-hour time periods, 48-hour time periods, whatever you want to see. So what's important to you and what's important to your job, you can actually go through and choose. Now, again, I kind of talked about it, but as you're looking at, one of the things I really love is it has the same versatility that you typically see in something like Power BI. You can actually notice in the different options as I hover over, it's going to basically drill down. The numbers of the different logs are going to change as I'm looking at the various days to correlate it to it. And I can actually drill in. So you can see I have a lot of data going on from this day. Well, let's go ahead and click on here and we can actually drill down in. This brings me to the log section. So this is kind of the first fundamental building block of what you're doing in Sentinel. You can actually see these are basic queries that we're going through and looking at. And I can actually get to the log sections from over here. And Microsoft will even start with sample queries to recommend. So you go through and look, and you can see the actual language that it's using. So let's go through and look at this second one here. This is a usage that it's going to go through and pull. So you can see it's pulling usage on a time range. All I have to do is click to run on this query, and just like that, it's actually gone in and pulled different data for me to be able to see. So tons of different logs, just as before. I can go in, and I can actually expand and choose to drill in. So if we're looking, this is a log from 2 days ago that happened at 8 p.m. I go in and look, it'll give me the tenant ID, tell me the computer that it's using, and different information like that. So I can actually see it looks like this is actually me going through and looking at a security insights thing inside of Office activity, and I can actually see the type of information that's going through and pulling. Now, this is a pretty complex and complicated thing, but as you're going through and looking at the different logs, there's tons of different information you can carry. It just depends on what you're actually going through and looking. So here's another example. This is actually the sign-in logs. So again, going through and pulling it up, it pulls all of the matches that meet that query, and I can go in and dig on each one. So I can actually see, look, this is an Azure AD sign-in. I can see the user in question. I can see the location they're coming from and where they're actually signing in. So again, this is like the first building block of what we're doing inside of Azure. We've gone in and gotten logs. So let's talk about how we get those logs into the system. So if you look under configuration, the first option is actually data configuration or data connectors. When you click on there, you'll actually see out of the box, there are currently 45 connectors with another one coming soon. And one of the things I love about Sentinel, look at the top one on the list, Amazon Web Services. AWS is one of Microsoft's biggest competitors, but what's awesome about Sentinel is they've really designed a one-stop shop for a security solution for customers. So you can actually go in and pull in AWS. You can pull in out of the box stuff like Azure Activity, Azure Active Directory, Advanced Threat Protection, some of the stuff that I've done. All the way down here, I have Office 365. But you'll notice again, they have third-party stuff like Palo Alto. They have ForcePoint. They have F5. What they're really trying to allow you to do is pull in any type of security logs and information that you want to, so you truly have an aggregation of your organization's security information that you can go through and pull in. Now, setting up the connectors are really easy. For instance, if I go through and look at Office 365, you'll notice whenever I click on it over here on the right, you can see it's already connected, but it'll tell you going through and looking on it what's happening. Specifically, I can see there's several workbooks, there's several queries. If I want to see what they are, I can even click on it and it'll actually take me all the way to there. But all I'm really caring about right now, if we go back, is actually doing the connection itself. So again, going in the connectors and looking at Office 365, I can't explain how easy this is. We actually open up the connector page, it will detail out what you need to be able to do. And actually, because I've already set it up, you don't see it. But under this configuration page, all I'd actually be required to have is either a global administrator or security admin, and this is simply just a login prompt. So I come here, I log in with that information, and just like that, I'm connected. And it's going to start ingesting over the information. Now, a lot of the base services from Microsoft are actually even free to use in Sentinel. So Azure AD, Cloud App Security, Advanced Threat Protection, Office 365, those type of information you're going to be able to ingest. And you can notice that's primarily what I've gone through and done. So now that, again, we're taking these logs and we're ingesting them in, that's what you see in the overview, and we even saw that I can then go and run queries on the logs. So it's one thing, and it's still kind of cool for me to be able to go in and say, okay, well, let's see this query on sign-in logs and see what's happening. But they take it another level when you go through and look at workbooks. So workbooks are basically visualizations, kind of that Power BI power that we talked about. So I'm going to quickly look at two of them. So let's start with Azure AD sign-in logs. So we look at this workbook. This is actually going to visualize the data that's coming in from my Azure AD connector and actually pull in all the different sign-in logs. Just like before, we can drill down. We can do a whole bunch of really cool stuff with it. And I can even customize it more myself if I wanted to. What you're seeing here is just out of the box. So you can notice on my tenant, I've been a busy person. I have tons of logins from the US, but I also have some from Brazil. I have some from Turkey, from Greece, from Canada, from Ukraine, from Singapore. Now, if I was a US-based company, this would be a little alarming to me. Maybe, there's a chance someone's gone on vacation, but if I'm just going through and I'm looking at logs, as you can see for the last 14 days, and I'm seeing all these logins coming from other countries, that's a little weird to me. But I don't have to go in and dig through the logs like I show you. I have this visualization. So I can click in here and I can actually see who's logging in from Brazil. I can see the city they're logging in, how many of the connections were. And again, it drills down as I click on there. I can see what looks like the admin account is signing in and it's successful. So now I know I probably need to get a hold of Adam and see if he's actually going through and doing it. And you can go in and drill down from there. Further down the page, you can actually even see it does stuff like sign-ins by devices. So looking under here with Windows 10, well, it looks like most of the users are signing in with Chrome, but clearly I have at least two computers coming in because I have a different version of Chrome. And look, I even have Edge. Well, again, maybe I'm a corporate system that Chrome is the browser that I have everyone using. And so seeing Edge is a little alarming to me. So I can click on here and I'm seeing this other admin login. Well, in my lab, I really only have one admin. So seeing the second admin login, even though it's successful, it's a little alarming to me. Maybe I need to dig into that. Maybe I need to go in. The workbook is making it much easier for me to visualize this information and decide what I need to do. Let's take a quick look at another workbook just because I think it's really cool. Coming through here and looking at Office 365. Office 365 is actually going to pull in a lot of information related to the different types of usage that you have inside of your tenant. So you notice right away I don't have any queries pulled up, but that's because I actually need to set the different settings and ranges that I have. So I can choose maybe I just want to look at Exchange, just want to look at OneDrive. I'm going to actually go ahead and pull in everything, and I also need to set the users. So again, we're going to look at all users. Once I do that, we'll see stuff come in and populate. And again, I have the ability to drill down. As I'm hovering over, it's going to show me different activity levels, what was happening on various days. Maybe 90 days is too much. So I'm going to go ahead and drill down. Let's just say the last 30 days. It's a little bit of a more compact view. And by doing that, again, I can go through and see the different stuff. It's showing me activity by workload, activity by type. If I scroll further on down, I can see user activity. I can even go down and see the various things that were happening. So one of the things that is probably concerning to me is knowing what's happening with my files. So I can go through here and I can see what percentage of the different resources of stuff happening. So again, files accessed, files viewed, files downloaded, files changed, files modified, files uploaded. All that are different options. And again, as I change the range up here or the user type or whatever, those values are going to change. So let's go down to 14 days. Same visualizations, but you're going to actually notice the data is now different. There's different percentages. And there's a ton here, guys. I can go in and see the different logs that are being pulled in, tons of really, really cool, valuable stuff, all out of the box just being provided to me. So going back a little bit deeper, we've kind of gone, okay, you have the data that you're pulling in, you have logs. You can use those logs to then build a workbook. But let's talk about where you're really going as an end game here, what's really going to be powerful. So now that we have those logs coming in, the probably two other things we're going to really care about are how do we investigate incidents whenever they're going through and happening? If there is a problem, how do I figure out what's happening? And on top of that, how do I maybe add automation? One of the really, really powerful things that you get by going through Sentinel is Sentinel is actually taking an enormous amount of data processing power in the cloud and distilling that down into information that really matters for you. It's not only using the processing power of the cloud, it actually uses machine learning to both figure out what really matters and even give you the option to add automation to it. So that's really going to be taking this to tier 3. That's going to be taking it to, I have the data, I've gone through and processed the data and visualized it, but let's take it where I can even take some work out of the plate. Let's make it so that I'm making the time that my security people are using, I'm making the time that my IT people are using more valuable and more meaningful. So when you go into incidents, what I actually want to show you guys with this is I'm going to actually pull up a couple slides because I don't want to show you guys information going on in one of our customer systems. So I want to actually show you what digging into an incident looks like. So this is an example incident of anomalous login for a user named Darcy. So when you actually go in and look at an incident, it pulls up this graph. The graph has different things you can go through and click on different objects, and you can actually drill down in similar ways that we've seen before. So going in, we want to look into this. And so I've gone and clicked on Darcy's name. Now that we've clicked on Darcy's name, it actually pulls up information. It tells me UPN suffix, it tells me the login ID, information like that that I can go through and see. What I'm actually looking at is this info right here on the side. Well, digging a little bit deeper after going through and looking at the entity, I actually want to go through and see more information. So this is showing me an example of a computer that had an issue going on as I'm going through and looking on it. So now that I have the entity selected, it's going to bring up these other what they call exploration queries that are basically other questions that I can pull in. You can see some of the stuff, related alerts, accounts with several failed logins, but there's some cool stuff here. This is a computer that's had an issue. So I can actually go in and pull in stuff like what processes are running on the host. I can go in and pull what user accounts have been created or deleted, what accounts have logged into this machine. If I know this computer's having a problem, I probably want to know what actors have been on there. And it actually is going to expand it out. So taking the early example we have of this anonymous login, well, I've gone through and looked at Darcy, and I noticed there was some other stuff going on with Darcy, and specifically the computer she was accessing. So there's an anonymous login for Darcy. She accessed this computer. And this computer, it looks like suspicious PowerShell activity was running. And from that specific PowerShell activity, which leads back to Darcy, it looks like there was a sign-in and a mass download of data. So, hairs on the back of my neck are standing up a little bit. Well, if I know this is probably not a login I want, well, let's figure out what we've done. I now no longer have to go in and dig manually. The investigation side of Sentinel is actually graphing this in a visual way for me to see that I can track all the different steps that are going on. So this gives you an even further viewed out view. So we have an anonymous login linked to Darcy. I know the computer with suspicious PowerShell activity, but let's figure out what else was going on. What other activities did the computer do whenever it was actually logged in? So this is actually going through and visualizing IPs, visualizing processes that ran on the computer. Similarly from Darcy itself, I can go through and see, well, what other machines did they access? What other stuff did they did? And it actually even puts everything together in this wonderful little timeline on the side where I can actually see noticeable events that I want to go through and see that are happening. And again, all visualized in this wonderful graph. I can then click on the different events to get additional details. So clicking on the suspicious PowerShell, it's going to isolate that thing and show specifically what's going through and happening there. So this is, again, going to the tier 3 level. I've gone through, I'm now not just looking at raw data, it's actually using machine learning to distill down the stuff that matters and the incidents that I want to look in, and then letting me visualize in a complete way what that complete process looks like, what happened, what do I need to do. Having this information here there, I went from just an alert saying, hey, there's a weird login to Darcy, to knowing what machines were accessed, what was done during that time that may be bad, how do I need to go through and correct it, and how do I need to protect myself as an organization. Really, really cool, really, really powerful stuff. Sorry I didn't show you guys that in an incident on the system itself. I don't have any security incidents going on in my lab environment, and I can't exactly log into a client's environment to show you guys that. So the next thing I wanted to show, I'm going to take a pause first to talk about the community, because that's where I got some of this stuff. So playbooks are really, really cool, but the community around Sentinel is pretty amazing. When you actually go to the community and come down here, you'll see you can open it, and it's actually going to pull up this information, which is a GitHub library. If you're a developer and you're someone that's used to GitHub, this will look familiar to you. You can actually go in and see they have tons of different folders of information, and all of these are processes that other people in the community have developed that they use, that they think is good, that they want to pull in, that you have the option to go in and download and integrate in your own environment. So what we're going to talk about here is playbooks, because playbook is really taking this to the final level that I think is really awesome, into the automation level. So if I go through and look at playbooks, you'll see there's a lot of different options in here. There's options, okay, well, someone's developed something where they want to go through and block an Azure Active Directory user. So I can go through and look at here, there's a README that will explain what it is, but I can tell you guys, because I know this, what this actually does is, well, when a security alert is generated on a user, it's going to go through and block their login just as a security precaution. And all I have to do if I want to do this is click deploy to Azure, and I even have a deploy to Azure Gov option. I click on this, it's going to download, it's going to deploy in directly. You guys see I've already done this, but I click on this, and it basically takes it right into my system, confirms the information I want. I have to choose resource groups and stuff, put my login information, but just like that, I can go in and I hit purchase. There's actually no cost here, but that's just going to go through and deploy the systems down into my tenant, which is, again, really, really cool. Going back to the community, just because I want to show you guys a couple other things looking at the playbooks, there's really, really cool stuff in here. If you're a security system that uses something like Zendesk or Snow or Jira, there's the ability to go through and open up tickets or close tickets automatically through security incidents. So maybe your security team manages a Zendesk installation. Well, you can have Sentinel, when they realize there's an issue, open up a ticket with all the appropriate details for your users to go through, or your security teams to look in. You have the ability to post messages through Teams. So let's look at one of these in action. We go through and we look at the playbooks itself. You guys can actually see, I'm going to have a couple of them that I just mentioned and talk about. Block AAD user, post messages into Teams. Looking at what this actually does, if you go in, you can actually hit edit. And if you've ever done Power Automate or Flow, this is going to look really familiar. This is actually Azure Logic Apps. And again, this is basically built on the idea of, I have a trigger that's going to start this, and I go through and put automatic actions. So without getting too deep into it, you can see my triggers is when a response is generated in Azure Sentinel, alert happens. Go ahead and get information about this alert, and for each incident about the alert, go ahead and post the message into Teams. So I could come into here and decide what team I wanted to post this into. I could decide what channel and then what information I wanted to have. So what this will do is, every time a Sentinel security alert goes off, I could basically go through and let my security team know in Teams, hey guys, there's a new alert you need to go through and check. So not only am I now ingesting all these logs in, I have these visualizations I can look into, I can go in and look at incidents, I actually have automation where I can go through and notify people. But that automation can even go further. We talked about the ability to do stuff like go through and block users. I wanted to actually show you one of these guys working in real time. So I built a really, really, really simple one that's just really simple to see. This is an alert when a security center alert is triggered, which is a type of log that I'm pulling into Sentinel. I'm telling it I want to go through and send an email. So you can see right here, what I'm basically saying is, hey guys, security center alert has been generated. Here's details about the alert so you know what's going on. Now, I have the ability to test this and see what it looks like. If you actually see I have this run trigger option. I click on it, you're going to see right here, once I hit run trigger and click the appropriate resources, oh, hey, I can see one running. Refresh it really quick, and from that, you're going to see, oh, hey, look, it succeeded. And all I have to do then is go and log into my email address. So I've already pulled it up over here. Hey, look, there's a new email. You notice there's not a lot of details in here. This is because I faked the trigger. There's not actual metadata for it to pull. But again, imagine the implications here. I've gone in, logs are being collected, they're being pulled into Sentinel, and I can send an email out to DL. I can send an email out to people that need to know about security things going on, and just like that, have details, maybe have instructions of what they need to do. So really, really cool things. Azure Sentinel itself processes over 10 petabytes of data a day. That's 10 Over 10 million gigs every single day of data is coming in. And the real power of the cloud that you're going through and getting for this is it distilling that information down and adding that machine learning on top of it. So what I've showed you primarily today are free stuff that you can access. Hopefully this gives you a comfort level that you can go on in your own tenant, get your hands dirty, set up some of the connectors, pull in some of the Office 365 and Azure data. But I'm telling you guys, we're just scratching the surface. What we focused on today was user logins, was user actions. The world is so much bigger for Azure Sentinel. Just like users, you can pull in data from machines. You can pull in Windows logs. You can pull in Linux logs. You can pull in Kubernetes logs. You could go through and pull data from AWS, from Azure, from your own data center, from basically any source that can pull in Ceph logs or sys logs, which are the two most common type of security logs in the industry. You can pull into Azure and then use the power of visualizing that data. Use the power of going through and doing investigations on it. Use the power of adding automations and Azure Logic apps to go through and make some of those processes easier. It is absolutely incredible the power and the reach that this product is going to have and the potential implications to organizations big and small. Hopefully what you guys have seen today has got you guys excited. This is without a doubt one of my favorite innovations coming out in the cloud. And again, we've just scratched the surface. The future is going to be awesome in this space, and some of the things that you can even do right now are really, really game changers. I want to thank the guys for having me on. I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to them, and thank you guys for a little bit of time that you gave me. I hope you have a wonderful day and the rest of your week.
Thanks, Adam. That was a great demo. Hopefully, just seeing how easy it is to get things going with Azure Sentinel, it gives you the confidence to start kicking the tires and at least ingesting maybe that Office 365 data and getting an idea for what that experience is. If you feel like you still need help, or you need more information, or your environment is particularly complicated, of course, reach out to Planet Technologies. You can reach us at go-planet.com at any time. Dennis?
And again, if you'd like more information about Azure Sentinel and want to see things like best practices, additional videos, information, and training, and tutorials, etc., go to aka.ms/Azure Sentinel. Thanks. Have a great day.